The faces I've seen when doing these repatriation flights of people who just wanted to get home. That was their only wish.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to COVID-19 Heroes. I'm your host, Lorraine Schneider, and for this episode, I went back to my European roots. I was able to connect with Jassin Kraft, a flight attendant for the German airline Lufthansa. I can't think of any other major industry that has been more severely affected by this pandemic than airlines, with planes being grounded all over the world due to the travel bans. Today, Jassin talks about these effects and tells us about repatriation flights from New Zealand to Germany that he was a part of to help stranded travelers and citizens return to their home country. Hi, Jassin. Thank you for being on today's show of COVID-19 Heroes. Welcome.
You're welcome.
So, most of our listeners are based in the United States. Can you give us a short, high-level overview of the current state of COVID-19 in Germany?
As far as of last night, and today we have April the 15th, we had about 110,000 COVID-19 cases in Germany. Of those have been 60,000, so almost half have overcome their illness, and about 2,900 have died due to this illness. And cases are still rising, but slower, and seems to get better than it was in the past weeks.
That's good to hear. But your country for now is still under lockdown, right?
We don't have this severe lockdown as many other countries have. We are a federal republic, so you have different states and they have different kind of laws or rules. Like in Bavaria, it's more severe that you are not allowed to go out for walks and for jogging. And in other federal states, you are allowed to do so. But usually you shouldn't do any holidays and travel and everything. You are still allowed to go shopping to the supermarkets and the other shops. Most of the shops are closed. Also like bars and restaurants like it is in the rest of the world. But I think for the time being, it's not so strong that you are not allowed to go out like it is in France, for example.
So Lufthansa conducted over 150 repatriation flights to get citizens who were traveling or living abroad back to Germany. And you took part in repatriation flights from New Zealand back to Germany. What does that entail?
I think the first thing is that our government asked Lufthansa if they are able to participate in these kind of repatriation flights. And as we are, of course, willing to do so, all these structural things that should be implemented, because for example, we don't fly to New Zealand, to the Southern Hemisphere. So we're flying different countries and the crews. You need for this long distance, it's about 10,000 nautical miles, which is about 12,500 statute miles. You need at least 2 crews because the distance is too far and the flight time is too long to cover this with one flight crew all the way down to New Zealand. And the catering, all the refueling, how is the refueling paid? How is catering done? How is technical support possible in New Zealand? Do they have a 747, for example? I participated in this first flight to Auckland. And does Air New Zealand has 747 and a technician which might be available, or a ramp agent, operations and everything. And of course, the crew, is there enough crew? And it was the flight, especially my flight, all the others as well, which were conducted in a very short advance. So some crew members were called just a couple of hours before. I got a call from our operations center about 24 hours in advance, and they asked me if I'm willing to do this flight. It was on a voluntary basis. I agreed, and they were also thinking whom they could call, because there were some crew members or some of my colleagues. They're living quite far away from Frankfurt, from our home base. So they even had themselves difficulties in getting into Frankfurt Airport to participate in this flight. And due to the fact that I live quite close to Frankfurt Airport, for me it wasn't any problem to reach the airport in about half an hour. Of course, I said yes, because I was sitting at home, couldn't do anything for that time being, and at least participate in a little bit of repatriation flights.
Have you ever participated in anything like that before?
I did, but this was in Ethiopia in 1992. I participated in one of the evacuation flights as well.
So this was probably, I assume, the biggest repatriation program that airlines all over have probably ever done, given the global scale.
Other case, I think, was just they were just concerned a few countries or a few people of part of the countries, but not the whole world like it was this time.
How do you ensure that social distancing guidelines are in place during such a flight?
Incoming flights into Frankfurt, we would like to take as many passengers as possible on board, so we occupy every seat. In contrary to these flights going out from Frankfurt, where we leave every second seat empty. And of course, if there are any passengers who show symptoms of illness or of COVID-19, we are, of course, not willing to take them on board. We don't take any risk of taking any infected people with us on board. I think that the situation on board during the flight is not as dangerous as when you're in a supermarket or somewhere on the ground, because the air conditioning in an aircraft is such kind of strong that there's an exchange of the air every few minutes, and the air usually comes out of the ceiling of the cabin and goes down to the floor and will be sucked out of the aircraft. So the risk of being infected in the aircraft is not that high. And as far as I know, there's no current case, at least from the colleagues, who has infected him or herself during a flight.
Knowing all of that, as we go forward over the next few months and, until really there is a vaccine out there, do you think flights will be handled differently than in the past, where you do have, like you said, seats apart and maybe other guidelines as well to protect the guests that are flying and also you as the staff?
As you said, yes, guidelines are in a permanent change. For example, when we flew out, we were brought to the aircraft, which was parked on the apron by buses. And for the time being, they try not to take any buses, so they can take the board and deboard directly at the terminal in groups, so that they can do their distancing by deboarding. For example, the deboarding process in Frankfurt is like that you have to wait for 15 minutes on board until the deboarding process can start, so that the cargo crew can take the suitcases out on the luggage belt, and then groups, each consisting not more than 40 people, are allowed to leave the plane at once, so that there are no large queues at immigrations and no large queues at the luggage belt. And with the boarding process, there are not just one or two buses, there's the double amount of buses used for boarding or deboarding. So processes are always, like the recommendations of the scientists, like every new result they get, it is turned into life and into real life on ground or in the air.
I can't think of any industry that has been worse hit by this pandemic than aviation. Now that you have less and less repatriations and most countries still do not allow for international travel and won't do so for a while, or at least flights will be restricted, what does it mean for you and your colleagues job-wise?
That's a good question. I can't really give you an answer about this because nobody knows yet. Because every now and then the rules are changing. For example, when we flew out we flew to Auckland via Tokyo, and there was no problem to leave Tokyo. And when we came into Tokyo the day before, there was no problem to get into Japan. But returning, the situation had changed, and the government forced us also to do a COVID-19 test. And so every time you can't predict it, really. Things and rules are changing. And so it's also in the future. We still have some basic long-haul flights which are still on schedule, but we really don't know if we can still go on with them in the future, because we don't know how the situation in the singular countries will change and how the rules will change. Even coming back to the EU, the EU has changed the rules that no one from abroad the EU is allowed to come into the EU, and the EU citizens, they themselves, the repatriation passengers, they have to go to 14 days of quarantine. So as long as the COVID-19 infection digits will not decline, I think we can't really estimate what's going on. So we are like many of the other airlines. We are also on short work time, which fortunately we have a government which is willing to pay 60% for single ones, and for families it's 67% of the net salary to pay for the next months. And we desperately hope that the situation will get better. I think the airline business will be the last business which is still recovering from that crisis.
So in a BBC article this past week, Lufthansa said that they have already idled more than 90% of its fleet since the virus outbreak and held talks with the German government about aid. This does not just affect your airline, but it affects so many airlines worldwide. So do you think there will be a point in time where maybe you as flight attendants and pilots may have to perhaps even think about a career change, because it's going to take maybe years to recover to go back to, pre-crisis levels?
As our CEO said, Mr. Spohr, he said that he will try to keep everybody on board. I don't know how it works, but already now we have some part-time models, and perhaps these ones who are working, for example, full-time right now, they can reduce to part-time. As the flight schedule will develop in the next month, these part-time schedules will also be helpful to get everybody can stay on board. Of course, not everybody who has family and needs to pay for their flat and houses can afford this, but perhaps in a mixture of, by the government and also the support of the company, we can survive the crisis. There are other airlines who dismiss their staff, but we are not in the situation right now. And we have a very good team spirit in our company, and this perhaps helps to survive the crisis. Nobody knows how it works out. Well, for sure, I think that the next 1.5 years will have amounts of passengers which will not even come close to these digits we had in the past. But perhaps if everybody takes part and is supportive and shows solidarity, we can survive it together.
That's great. I love hearing about the team spirit. And I also have one of your colleagues who I know who told me that actually there's quite a few of you who are using your time right now to also volunteer at hospitals or even helping harvest asparagus and strawberries and all of that. So I thought that was quite neat for you guys to use this time to serve your community even more.
Yes, there are quite a lot of colleagues who did so, and last week I saw a report on German TV by a German doctor in the Munich hospital, and he was really glad to be able to get some of our colleagues support the nurses and the doctors in the hospital.
So what lessons do you think you personally will draw from this experience?
Perhaps kind of modesty, that there are other things in life, just, of course everybody would like to proceed forward, but, in a more modest way. I think everybody of us has thought in the past that how the development of the whole world, how should it continue? Because we are using more of everything, of our resources, which could really be reestablished. But perhaps this is a thing everybody can come back to the basics. What is really important for life? I don't know if you know Arthur Schopenhauer, which was a German philosopher from the 18th century. He said that Health might not be everything, but without health, everything is nothing. So health is very important. And the faces I've seen when doing these repatriation flights of people who just wanted to get home, that was their only wish. And this was such a high emotional thing that I think that perhaps humanity or human beings learn from this, that they are more modest than before and appreciate what the basic life, what the real life means. I believe in the good thing in a human being, so I hope that this will be something which will take place in the future.
Well, Jassin, thank you so very much for taking the time to talk with me today and share about everything that Lufthansa has been doing to repatriate its citizens worldwide, and for you for volunteering to be on those flights as well.
You're welcome, Lorraine.
I'd like to close off this episode by thanking all airline personnel, from flight attendants to pilots and airport staff. Without you, we wouldn't be able to travel for fun or business, or even return home in times of crisis. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and as always, you can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram and subscribe to it on all major podcasting platforms. Thank you, and until next time, I'm your host, Lorraine Schneider.